Listen, if a man hurts you, the first thing you need to understand is this: pain is not love. Too many people confuse the two. They think if it hurts, it must be deep, it must be real, it must mean something. No, pain is a signal. It's your heart telling you something is wrong, and if you ignore that signal long enough, you start losing yourself trying to hold on to someone else. Pain is not love, no matter how intense it feels or how deeply it touches your emotions. A lot of people grow up believing that if something hurts, it must be meaningful, that emotional struggle is somehow proof of connection. But real love does not constantly leave you feeling broken, anxious, or questioning your worth. Pain is a signal, not a foundation. It's your inner voice telling you that something is off, that your emotional needs are not being met, and that you are giving more than you are receiving.
When someone truly cares about you, they don't make a habit of hurting you.
They don't repeatedly cross lines and then come back with apologies that change nothing. Love is consistent in its respect. It shows up in how someone speaks to you, how they treat you during disagreements, and how mindful they are of your feelings. If what you're experiencing is confusion, emotional highs followed by deep lows, or a constant need to earn basic kindness, that's not love. It's instability. The problem is that pain can become addictive. The cycle of hurt and temporary affection tricks your mind into holding on, making you believe that if you just endure a little more, things will finally get better. You start associating struggle with passion, thinking that the more you fight for it, the more valuable it becomes. But love isn't something you should have to fight for every single day just to feel secure. It's not supposed to drain you more than it fulfills you. Confusing pain with love often leads you to tolerate things you normally wouldn't accept. You begin to justify behavior that clearly disrespects you. Telling yourself stories to make it easier to stay, you minimize your feelings, silence your concerns, and slowly lose sight of what healthy love is supposed to feel like. Over time, your standards drop, and what once felt unacceptable becomes normal. Love, in its real form, brings a sense of calm. It doesn't mean there won't be challenges, but those challenges don't come from intentional harm or repeated disrespect. Instead, they come from growth, understanding, and learning each other without tearing each other down in the process. Repeated hurt is not a mistake. It's a pattern, and patterns reveal intention more clearly than words ever will. Anyone can apologize. Anyone can say, I didn't mean it, or it won't happen again. But when the same behavior keeps showing up over and over, it stops being an accident. It becomes a choice. And that choice tells you exactly where you stand in that person's priorities. At first, it's easy to give the benefit of the doubt. You tell yourself, maybe it was a bad day. Maybe they were stressed. Maybe they didn't realize how much it hurt you. But when you've already expressed your feelings and nothing changes, the situation becomes clearer. A person who values you listens, adjusts, and makes an effort not to repeat what caused you pain. A person who doesn't will keep doing the same thing, expecting your tolerance to stay the same. Patterns don't lie, even when people do. Words can be soft, convincing, and full of promises, but actions are consistent and visible. If someone keeps hurting you in the same way, it means they've learned that they can. They've learned that no matter what they do, you'll still be there, still understanding, still hoping. And once that lesson is learned, the behavior rarely stops on its own. This is where many people get stuck. They hold on to the potential of what could be instead of facing the reality of what is. They focus on the good moments, the apologies, the brief periods where everything feels right again. But those moments are part of the cycle. They don't erase the pattern. They maintain it. They keep you emotionally invested just enough to stay, even when the overall experience is hurting you. Recognizing a pattern requires honesty with yourself. It means stepping back and looking at the bigger picture instead of isolated moments. It means asking yourself if the behavior has truly changed or if it's just being repeated with different words attached to it. Because real change doesn't need constant explanation. It shows itself through consistent action. Once you see the pattern clearly, you can't unsee it. And at that point, the question is no longer, why is this happening? But why am I still accepting it? Setting strong boundaries is not about controlling someone else's behavior. It's about defining what you will and will not accept in your own life. A lot of people misunderstand boundaries as threats or ultimatums, but they are actually a form of self-respect. They are the line that protects your peace, your dignity, and your emotional well-being. Without them, you leave the door open for others to treat you however they choose, and over time, that can slowly wear you down. The mistake most people make is thinking that simply expressing a boundary is enough. They say, I don't like that, or please don't do this again. But then nothing changes. Why? Because a boundary without enforcement is just a suggestion. It only becomes real when there is a clear consequence attached to it. And more importantly, when you are willing to follow through on that consequence, no matter how uncomfortable it feels. Enforcing a boundary is where your strength is tested. It's easy to speak up when emotions are high, but it's much harder to stay consistent when you're faced with the fear of losing someone. That fear is what keeps people stuck. They soften their limits, make exceptions, and give endless chances because they don't want the relationship to end. But every time you ignore your own boundary, you send a message, not just to the other person, but to yourself, that your standards are flexible when they shouldn't be. People learn how to treat you based on what you allow. If you tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, or emotional harm without consequence, it becomes the norm, not because it's right, but because it's accepted. On the other hand, when you clearly define your limits and stand by them, you create a standard that filters out behavior that doesn't align with your values. Enforcement doesn't always mean confrontation or conflict. Sometimes it simply means removing your energy, your time, or your presence from situations that cross your line. It's a quiet but powerful decision that says you are no longer available for what hurts you. Strong boundaries require clarity, consistency, and courage. They require you to choose long-term peace over short-term comfort and self-respect over temporary attachment. You cannot fix someone who doesn't want to change, no matter how much effort, patience, or love you pour into them. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, because when you care about someone, your instinct is to help them, to support them, to believe in who they could become. You see their potential, their good moments, the version of them that shows up just enough to keep you hopeful. And you convince yourself that if you just try a little harder, love a little deeper, or stay a little longer, things will finally shift. But change doesn't come from your effort. It comes from their decision. It requires self-awareness, accountability, and a genuine desire to be better. You can encourage someone, you can communicate your feelings, and you can even show them what healthy behavior looks like, but you cannot do the internal work for them. That's something they have to choose on their own, and no amount of sacrifice on your part can replace that choice. What often happens instead is that you start overextending yourself. You become more patient than you should be, more forgiving than is healthy, and more understanding than the situation deserves. You start justifying their behavior, making excuses for things that clearly hurt you because you're focused on the idea that they're trying or will get there eventually. Meanwhile, the reality stays the same and the burden of the relationship falls more and more on you. Trying to fix someone can also slowly take away your sense of self. You begin to prioritize their growth over your own well-being. Your energy goes into managing their moods, avoiding triggers, or keeping the peace instead of building a relationship where both people are equally responsible for its health. Over time, this imbalance creates exhaustion, resentment, and emotional burnout. There's also a hidden message in this dynamic. When someone sees that you're willing to stay no matter what, even while they refuse to change, they lose the urgency to do better. Not always intentionally, but because there's no real consequence pushing them to grow. Comfort replaces accountability. Letting go of the idea that you can fix someone is not giving up. It's accepting reality. It's understanding that love is not about changing someone into who you need them to be, but about recognizing who they already are and deciding if that aligns with what you deserve. Choosing self-respect over attachment is one of the most difficult decisions you will ever face, because attachment can feel powerful, familiar, and even comforting, even when it's tied to pain. You get used to the person, the routine, the connection, and the idea of losing it can feel more frightening than staying in something that hurts you. So you hold on, not always because it's right, but because it's known. And the unknown can feel overwhelming. But self-respect asks something different from you. It asks you to step back and look at the situation honestly, without letting your emotions distort what you see. It asks you to recognize when you are being treated in a way that doesn't align with your worth. And more importantly, it asks you to act on that recognition, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it hurts. Attachment often makes you tolerate things you shouldn't. It convinces you to accept less than you deserve because you're afraid of having nothing at all. You start negotiating your standards, lowering your expectations, and telling yourself that this is just how relationships are. But deep down, there's a voice that knows the truth. A voice that reminds you that love is not supposed to cost you your peace, your confidence, or your sense of self. Walking away is not about giving up on someone. It's about refusing to give up on yourself. It's a decision that comes from strength, not weakness. It means you are no longer willing to stay in a situation where you are consistently hurt, overlooked, or disrespected. It means you value your emotional well-being enough to let go of something that no longer serves you. And yes, it's not easy. There will be moments of doubt, moments where you question if you made the right choice, moments where you miss what you had, but those moments are part of the process, not a sign that you should go back. Growth often feels uncomfortable because it requires you to break old patterns and step into something unfamiliar. Self-respect is not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, firm, and consistent. It shows up in the decisions you make when no one is watching. It's choosing yourself, even when your emotions are pulling you in the opposite direction.